My roommates called me their personal maid, so I watched their nightmare unfold. You've been sick for 3 days and there's nothing to eat in this house, Brad screamed at me while I was curled up on the bathroom floor with a 39-degree fever. The dishes are piling up, the trash stinks, and we have people coming over tomorrow, Paige added from the doorway, stepping over my legs to grab her makeup. That's when I realized something was very wrong. For 2 years, I'd woken up at 6 a.m. to make breakfast for 3 adults. I bought all the groceries, paid for all the supplies, handled all the utilities billing, scheduled all the maintenance. I'm really sick, I managed to whisper. Then Garrett appeared behind them. Yeah, but the house doesn't run itself. You know we depend on you for this stuff. Depend on me? Like I was their mother? 3 working adults who made more money than me, standing over my sick body, were angry that their unpaid servant wasn't functioning. When I finally crawled back to my room, questions started flooding my fevered brain. When was the last time any of them had touched a vacuum? Never. Who had cleaned the bathroom they all used? Me? Always me. I grabbed my phone and checked my banking app. $12,000. That's what I'd spent on household expenses in the past year. My Venmo requests to them, all ignored or met with, "I'll get you next time." But there was never a next time. The time Paige's boyfriend complimented the spotless house and she said, "We like to keep things nice." We? As if she'd ever held a mop. By day 4 of my flu, the house was apparently uninhabitable. Paige sent me a photo of the kitchen with a message, "This is disgusting. How do you expect us to live like this?" The counter had maybe 10 dishes, the same amount they'd leave for me every single day. When I finally emerged from my room, weak but standing, all 3 were waiting in the living room. "We need to have a serious conversation about your commitment to this household," Brad started, voice stern like he was my boss. "While you were sick, everything fell apart. That's unacceptable." I stared at them in disbelief. "Do you know how embarrassing it was to cancel our dinner party because the house was a mess? You could have cleaned it yourselves," I said quietly. Garrett actually laughed. "If you wanted us to clean, you should have established that boundary from the start. But you volunteered to be our personal maid. You created this dynamic." "Personal maid?" I repeated. "That's what you call it? What else would you call someone who cooks, cleans, and manages a household?" Brad asked. "You made yourself indispensable. You can't just stop because you got a little sick." "A little sick? I literally lost 8 pounds. We all get sick," Paige said, rolling her eyes. "Anyways, you have 3 days to get this house back in order. The refrigerator needs restocking, bathrooms need deep cleaning, and we're having Garrett's parents over this weekend." That night, lying in my bed, I had 2 options. I could go back to being their servant, spending my money and my energy maintaining their lives while they treated me like hired help they didn't even pay. Or I could leave, but they needed me to pay my portion of the rent. Without me, they couldn't afford this place. And despite everything, part of me worried about them. How would they function? Would they eat only takeout? Would the place become condemned? "They're adults," I whispered to myself. "They survived before you." But the guilt gnawed at me. Maybe Garrett was right. I had volunteered for this. No, I never volunteered to be treated subhuman. I'd tried to be a good roommate, and they'd exploited that. The next morning, Brad knocked on my door. "I don't smell breakfast." That's when I knew my decision was made. "And you won't," I said. His face went red. "Excuse me? I'm done. I'm not cooking, cleaning, or buying anything for this house anymore." "Then you can find somewhere else to live," he threatened. I smiled for the first time in days. "Already am." I moved out 2 weeks later. In those 2 weeks, I didn't lift a finger. The house devolved into chaos. Dishes molded, trash bags piled up, and the smell became unbearable. Paige begged me to, just this once, clean the bathroom. I laughed. Brad tried to guilt me about abandoning my commitments. Garrett threatened to sue me for breach of verbal contract. I just kept laughing. Within a month of my leaving, they couldn't find a 4th roommate. Nobody lasted past the apartment viewing once they saw the filth. They tried hiring a cleaner but couldn't afford $200 weekly plus the groceries they now had to buy themselves. Brad's girlfriend dumped him after seeing the state of the place. Paige got food poisoning from her own attempt at meal prep. After 3 months, the landlord evicted them for health code violations. Apparently the Roaches had moved in. They had to split up because no one would rent to all 3 together. Garrett moved back with his parents. Brad and Paige found separate places with very strict roommates who used chore charts. Karma's beautiful.